legal assistance. Our biggest unit is child advocacy, where we have attorneys assigned to represent children in the foster system by court appointment. Adult guardianships, where attorneys represent protected persons by court appointment. Consumer Housing Division, where we represent tenants and housing matters, but also other consumer matters. Predatory lending seems to come up quite a bit. Senior Law Center, which is down at the Washoe complex on 9th Street. So they're like a satellite office for us, but they're still part of Washoe Legal. And they provide an array of services to senior citizens, including consumer housing, victim advocacy, and estate planning. Our Immigration Department, where we have 2 certified specialists who represent persons with a variety of applications and proceedings, including adjustment of status to refugee, T visa, U visa, VAWA applications, and removal proceedings in some cases. We have a self-help center, which is one of the best kept little secrets here in Washoe County, where we assist any comer without regard to income with any forms for any type of legal proceeding that they need help finding the right form or completing their forms. We also do a lot with helping people set up their eFlex accounts, the electronic court filing system, as it can be quite confusing for a lot of people. And then finally, my unit, Victim Advocacy, where we provide attorney representation in protection order matters, as well as other select family law matters like divorce, child custody, that kind of fun stuff. So next slide. So how would a person who needs family law or protection order representation access what we do at Washoe Legal Services or our Victim Services unit? We have the whole plethora of call, email, or walk-in contact informations on the website. We also try to do outreach wherever we can to make sure our information is available. Now that our doors are open again, it's a little easier for people to access us, although we were still doing calls and emails before. But now we're back to being able to walk in, which is especially helpful if they've gotten to the courthouse and gotten confused and need some additional help. They can just come right up the street and get that help. We do have an intake questionnaire that we use to acquire the grant information that we need to populate for grant reporting purposes, and we use that questionnaire to screen for assigning an attorney to the case. So if a person already has a TPO, temporary protection order, and they have an EPO, or extended protection order hearing pending, we urge them to sign up for our clinic, which is every Wednesday at 10 a.m., because that way in a group setting, we can get our information to more people than if we were to try to schedule individual consultations with each person. Individual legal consultations can take an hour or more often. And if we did individual consultations with every intake, we'd never have time to get to court or do motion practice or do the rest of what we need to do. So we do the clinic to try to get the information to as many people as possible in one setting. And it's just a general overview at how does an EPO hearing work? What's the procedure? What can you expect? What is the court looking for? What are the legal requirements? How do you present evidence that their adverse party will be there? And just some tips on how to get through the hearing and be effective for that hearing. Our attorney focus is providing representation for EPO hearings, but we also do screen and accept family law matters, as I said, divorce, child custody, child support, where attorney services are needed to keep victims safe. Protection orders only last so long. If you're married to your abuser, then when the protection order expires, if you don't have a divorce, you're legally locked to that person. And oftentimes a divorce is necessary to end that bond. If you share children with your abuser, then you're going to need some kind of custody orders in order to provide some I don't want to say permanency because I'm not sure stuff with children is ever actually permanent, but at least to provide some rules, orders, and guidelines to get people past the end of their protection order. Most important, so I put it in bold and caps, there's no income qualifier for our victim services. Our victim services are all free. The attorney representation is free, the clinic is free, and for protection orders, we literally do not screen for income. It doesn't matter to us how much the victim makes, how much assets they would have available. The primary reason for this is that oftentimes they cannot access their resources, or protection orders tend to come up pretty fast. After hours protection orders are heard on a 7 to 10 day turnaround usually. Regular temporary protection orders with children only last 2 to 3 weeks. And even a protection order without children is issued for a maximum of 45 days. And it can be hard, even if you have the money, to find a private attorney in a short turnaround window. So we focus on getting victims, no matter their financial status, attorneys for those protection order hearings. We will look a little more closely for a family law matter before accepting it to see if perhaps there's an ability to obtain private counsel. But by and large, we're trying not to have income be a barrier. And that's just because, as you all know, attorneys can be expensive. And just because you make, quote unquote, a decent living doesn't mean you have access to that money. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that you have a few $1,000s just sitting somewhere available to be used. So our screening process is a little stricter for family law, but certainly we are taking family law cases. Next slide, please.
I actually have a question, Ms. Jill.
Sure.
On your EPO hearings that you have every Wednesday at 10 a.m., are those just for Washoe Legal Service clients, or can other victim service providers recommend their clients go to those?
Fabulous question and very good point. We do ask that people register in advance so that we know who to expect. And we have started offering those in a hybrid model. So both Zoom and if a person wants to come in personally, we can present in person again. But we do welcome victim services providers or other advocates who just want to kind of get a feel for what we're presenting to clients, or better understanding themselves of how these hearings work. We would welcome attendance. Just let us know ahead of time so we can register you in to know to expect you, but absolutely welcome. And as a side note, I should mention that we will do trainings for any of your groups on any area of the law that you run up against. For example, I just did a relocation clinic for an advocates group, a presentation on what it takes to relocate with a child and how the domestic violence exception works. So that's an available thing that we'll do as well if you have a group of advocates who want a little primer during one of your meetings or trainings on some family law thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jill.
Sure thing. Next slide. So this gets more into not just what Washoe Legal does, but in case there are any advocates in this meeting who may not be aware of how the process works, it is a little different depending on which county you are in or which court you are dealing with. In some of the rural areas, they actually have people go through justice court, even though they're asking for a domestic protection order, unless they actually have a case in their district court, such as an ongoing divorce case. So that it will depend on the court. And in the larger jurisdictions, Clark and Washoe, after hours protection orders are available if an abuser has been arrested for domestic battery in any form. The victim is able to use the phone to get a protection order so that the adverse party can be served well under arrest so that they know that should that adverse party be able to bail bond or OR out, that they know about the protection order. The forms now are statewide. Those forms are available on the websites of courts that use electronic filing, and even courts that don't use electronic filing, you can modify the statewide form for any jurisdiction. Applicants can fill out the forms on their own. In some jurisdictions, including Washoe, they can actually fill them out online. Applicants are able to use assistance. So advocates can assist victims in filling out their forms. That will not be held against the victim. And where you have a victim who has literacy, language, trauma, injury, and they cannot write or type clearly, or they need to be walked through each question carefully and slowly, having an advocate assist with that is highly encouraged because you want applications to be as clean and clear as possible. And you want the application to identify the NRS 33 recent acts of domestic violence. That is what the judge is going to be keen on when determining whether or not to issue a temporary protection order. We do have people come here asking for help in getting a temporary protection order. Honestly, it is faster and easier for them to do it without an attorney. Attorneys on the paperwork initially seem to muddle the system, but once they are getting their temporary protection order, getting representation for an extension hearing is highly encouraged. Next slide. So why do I say getting an attorney is highly encouraged for an extended protection order hearing? In general, victims don't need an attorney to get a temporary order. The process is done just on paperwork. Up here in the north, you fill out your application, you turn it in, our courtmaster reviews it, our courtmaster determines if you're going to get a temporary order or not. And I see that a question has popped up about notification. That is part of the eFlex system. And yes, if an adverse party is on eFlex, they are going to get a notification that something has been filed against them. I do know that the Protection Order Help Center and Filing Office are working on a way to have the eFlex held back so that the adverse party does not find out right away. But in general, the eFlex system is intended to notify people right away if anything is filed. So if the adverse party is in the eFlex system, you should be aware that it is quite possible that they will be notified until they update the system to provide some kind of a delay in eFlex. So when a victim does just the paperwork and gets a temporary protection order, there's somewhat of a feeling that, oh, that wasn't that hard. I didn't even have to see a judge. I didn't have to present any evidence. I just filled out a form. Extension hearings are real hearings, Zoom or not. Yeah, Heather, I wish I could tell you when they're going to fix that. I would ask that question of Emily when she has her protection order meeting on August 30th about what the Protection Order Help Center is doing. She might have a better answer. It is a tragedy that we do not have 24/7.
Thanks for that. I've been asking for 4 years. I appreciate it.
The extension hearings are real hearings. The adverse party has the right to attend, to have counsel if they wish to bring witnesses, to cross-examine, to present evidence. And victims don't quite understand that, that their adverse party will be there, could possibly have an attorney, could possibly fight the protection order. Both sides will be heard. Where the parties share children, custody and visitation will be decided. It says that in their temporary orders, but a lot of victims just kind of skim over it and don't really read it or know that that's going to happen. They assume that they're going to get primary physical custody, and or they assume that the adverse party will not get any kind of visitation or contact. Now, I know that these are stereotypes and not everything applies in every case. Sometimes victims want the adverse party to have visitation. Sometimes it makes sense. But in general terms, we often see people who just do not understand that their adverse parties' visitation and contact with children will be discussed and determined at an extension hearing. And the issue with that is that whatever the court master decides is going to have a carryover effect into any civil matter that comes later, or any motions to modify existing civil orders, divorce, custody, motion practice, that kind of thing. So if visitation is determined at the EPO hearing and visitation is going fine, there aren't any huge issues or problems or red flags, then the odds of that custody/visitation schedule going forward in the civil case is highly likely, because it is the status quo. And it can be an uphill battle for victims to, once something is given to an adverse party, it is hard to get it taken away. It becomes a higher burden, a higher level of proof. The court can look at child support, household support, will look at housing, if there's a protected address, vehicles in some situation, if the victim needs a vehicle, and similar ancillary matters. That's very limited. And a lot of times people come in looking for money in some way, and the court just doesn't have the information necessary to make an informed decision. The court will make some decisions where it looks like an emergency situation, but otherwise the court up here in the north is going to push for the proper use of other civil matters: divorce, child support, child custody. At a hearing, sometimes they're pretty recent, especially the after hours ones, to the trauma that caused the person to apply for protection. And they get, it's not just victims, people in general get lost in the legal lingo. I like to call it a foreign language in a foreign country with foreign customs. They're under stress, they get triggered with PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety. Having an attorney allows them to just focus on answering questions and not worrying about how to present things, or when they should talk or when they shouldn't talk, and blanking out, which is a common thing that happens, a brain freeze, so to speak. Having an attorney walks a victim through the process to help limit some of the triggers and anxieties, or at least allow a focus on questions as opposed to feeling lost. Next slide. So just a primer on NRS 33. Hopefully any of you that do help people fill out TPOs, keep this like laminated somewhere and show it to your victims so that they can help focus their story to things that are on this list, because this is what the judge is looking for. The third entry, coercion, I want to explain that one real quick, although you could go look up 207, I suppose. Coercion is when you tell someone they must do something or else, or conversely, you tell someone they cannot do something or else. Either of those scenarios is coercion. Where we often see coercion is a threat of suicide. If you leave me, I will kill myself. That is an act of coercion. And a lot of times victims don't really understand coercion, but they often have been coerced in one way or another. Next slide. And what is not domestic violence, although you will see victims focus on this a lot: arguing. Doesn't matter whether it's mutual or one-sided. It doesn't matter whether it's a quiet discussion or a loud fight. Name calling, even if the names are vulgar or obscene, and even if that happens in the presence of children. Other obscenities, disparagement, gaslighting, or just being yelled at are not NRS 33 acts of domestic violence. They are part of the cycle of domestic violence. They are part of power and control. They can become evidence in terms of custody decisions, but they are not going to get someone a temporary or extended protection order because they are not NRS 33 forms of violence. Next slide. And then an explanation of a domestic protection order. These are the ones that are coming out of family court and what it takes in order to qualify for a family court protection order. And I just put it up there quick. You can actually find this on the Washoe website, the Washoe Court's website, which is very handy when you're helping people with TPOs and you have a unique situation and you're double checking to make sure they qualify for a domestic protection order as opposed to just a justice court stalking and harassment order. Next slide. Whoops, we skipped one. And these are the relationships that don't qualify. These are people that you would refer over to justice court. You can still assist them in applying for actually what's called a restraining order as opposed to a protection order. I know those semantics are often confused, but that is the difference. A protection order comes out of family court for domestic relationships and is intended to protect the victim. A restraining order comes out of justice court and is intended to restrain an adverse party from being around the offended party. And then our last slide is just our closer with who we are, where we are. And my email's on the bottom there, although you can find me through the website pretty easy as well. And if we have time, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that might come through.
We do have a little bit of time. Does anybody have any questions that they didn't feel comfortable asking through the chat? You can unmute yourself. You can ask through the chat. You can ask privately through the chat, and I can relay the question for you if you'd like. We'll give a couple minutes to ask any questions, and then I will transfer it over to Veronica. Thank you for the presentation, Roger. Yes.
You can hear me? Okay. Just talking about eFlex, thank you for that explanation. I do tend to agree with my client that if a client is really expecting 7 days, as the application says, then that's could be a pretty big flaw, where if they're in eFlex, they get notified right away. I mean, that could be a safety issue. So do you know how close they are to addressing that, or can?
I do not. I'm looking for an update when August 30th, they're doing a protection order help center kind of meeting, update, conversation. And I'm hoping for some information then. I will say that if you have an issue, so if you're in after hours, you're going to find out very quickly whether or not you've got a TPO. If you're applying during normal business hours, up here in the north, you will typically get a response from our court within 24 hours, and usually much quicker than that. If you apply in the morning, in general, you will have an answer by the afternoon. And if you get the TPO, then it's somewhat less of an issue. It's just a question of getting it served. Where you'd run into more of an issue is where you don't get a TPO and it's denied, which of course can create a safety problem, or you get what's called a hearing to issue, which means the judge has looked at it and has said, well, maybe there's something here, but I'm just not quite sure. So within the next 7 to 10 days, I'm going to bring everybody in and I'm going to hear from them directly. And then I will decide if a TPO issues or not. In those cases, the adverse party is going to know through eFlex, but also because they have to be served. But there is no TPO. There is only a hearing to issue to decide if a TPO will be awarded. And those are difficult situations for victims to stay safe during that time period.
have any further questions for Jill while we've got her on?
Hi, Jill. This is Christy Oriel from Sierra Community House. I just had a question between the distinction of protection and restraining orders. From what I recall, if there's an actual criminal restraining order, that's not going to show up in the law enforcement database. Is that accurate?
It was, but it will be changing. One of our strongest arguments about urging victims to get protection orders was because even with a crime and even with a no contact order, the no contact order had no teeth. If it was violated, it didn't mean much. It did mean that somebody that was out could, an abuser could get put back in because they violated the terms of their release or their sentence. But you had to go through the prosecutor's office. They had to decide if they wanted to issue a warrant. It was a big old thing. That is changing. Law just passed this last session. As of October 1st, a no contact order can be criminally prosecuted if it is violated. There is a process for that. The victim actually has to ask for that. And I do know that the prosecutor's offices, as well as the advocates that work in law enforcement, are starting to institute those procedures so that come October 1st, no contact orders will have a bit more teeth to them. I will say, though, that it's likely to roll out like Marcy's Law. It's a big change. It's going to require some big procedures. And I still think that a domestic protection order with its set and stable procedures is going to be a preferred route for safety until we get the kinks ironed out in those no contact orders. And still, I urge people to layer their protections. Put as many layers in place as you can to keep yourself safe. And yes, Sandy, I am open to emailing with questions when you've got a unique situation you need to run by a lawyer. I'm happy to help.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions for Jill, if we have any. All right. Thank you so much, Jill, for your presentation. We will share the information about Washoe Legal Services and this presentation to everybody as soon as we're able to post it up on our website. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Veronica. I just made you the presenter, Veronica, so you should be able to share your screen. There you go.
All right, good morning, everybody. Can you see my screen okay with the presentation on it?
I can.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to have a hard time seeing any questions that come through. So Jean, if you'll just interrupt me, if anything needs to be answered, that would be fantastic.
I definitely will, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Veronica LaChance. I am the Executive Director with Family Support Council. I have been with the organization now for almost 10 years through a various array of different positions, and I've been the director now since November of last year. We are going through quite a few changes to include rebranding and getting ourselves out there. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have these presentations, sometimes being in the rural communities for you know, maybe the forgotten sister. So we like to put our name out there. Collaboration is really important to us, as I said, and then any referrals or resources that we can get with our sister organizations or community entities is fantastic. So I'm just going to go through a brief timeline of our organization. We're unique in the sense that we don't just provide victim services. We kind of do an array of different things to help support healthy families here in Douglas County. So as you can see, our mission on the screen for Family Support Council is to provide education, prevention, and intervention services to support the growth and development of healthy families. So that, of course, can include an array of different things. A family can be a single person all the way up to, a mother with 5 kids needing shelter to an adult with developmental disabilities. So I will run through each of the services that we provide. And then again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. So Family Support Council started in 1982. It was developed by a group of mental health professionals that realized there was a gap with helping those who were impacted by family violence. In 1983, we opened one of the first domestic violence 24-hour crisis lines in Nevada, and we are still in operation today. We are actually connected with the national hotline. So we get an array of calls. We kind of all learned the hard way that there are many Douglas counties in the United States. So on occasion, we get calls from Douglas counties in Oregon to Douglas counties in Tennessee. Sometimes our crisis line, either volunteers or staff are tasked with doing some Google searches to find resources available in those other states. We currently have 3 fantastic crisis line volunteers that help us on various days of the week. Otherwise, due to staffing and some, turnover that we've had, as well as I think the staffing limitations that most people are experiencing because of the pandemic, we have 3 dedicated crisis line staff that actually are either helping with backup during the week that the volunteers are on, or are our direct resource. So we're kind of just trying to make it all work in that sense. In 1984, we developed the first family resource model, and we still implement it to this day. Most counties actually have some sort of family resource model available as well. Through our kind of one-stop shop for families, we offer parenting classes. At one point, we were able to offer couples counseling because of one of the therapists we had on staff. Unfortunately, we have lost that therapist, so we are hoping to be able to reintroduce that sometime soon. We do offer direct counseling services. We have 2 marriage and family therapists on staff, and their focus is on family violence, so they're able to offer one-on-one support for those impacted by family violence. We also have a weekly women's support group. It right now is virtual because of the pandemic. It is every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and participants can log on and kind of get, group support and have discussions with people who've probably experienced similar things. We're hoping to bring that back to in-person once things maybe calm down a little bit, because we do realize that sometimes those groups are more impactful when you're able to be in person and kind of separate yourself from maybe sitting at your house or being in situations that might have been triggers before. We also offer holiday meals. So every Thanksgiving, we receive a generous donation from the local Men's Active 2030 Club. Last year, we gave away 30 complete Thanksgiving meals to Douglas County families in need. We work closely with the Carson Valley Community Food Closet to make sure that we're filling the gaps of families that maybe miss the signups or maybe fall outside of their income guidelines. Outside of that, we just try to meet family needs in community or in collaboration with other community agencies. So a lot of our resources and referrals come through our family resource program. In 1988, our board actually developed what we called Pat's Place. Pat's Place was actually a foster family program, and it was for women and children who were fleeing domestic violence. It was kind of our kickoff of shelter at that time. Families would stay with board members until some sort of safe housing option was available. This came with a lot of liability, so we did realize that we would need to work to try to find a better resource and a safer location that was less impactful, to our board members. And so just a little blurb to go outside of that, some of the other services that we provided beginning in 1992 was our annual Candlelight Vigil. We still have that today. Our Candlelight Vigil takes place every October, and it's for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We bring the community together and have collaborations from survivors who choose to tell their story, and then musical tributes as well. And we kind of got away from providing that event for a while, but we are back in full swing, and we see what a huge impact it has on our community. We began to offer teen parenting classes, so either parenting for adults with teenagers, or we would go into the schools, and when there was a teen who came forward with a pregnancy, we would help provide the resources actually during one of their class periods to help them with the parenting process. We had some other group therapy options that were added as well. Right now we offer an estranged parenting group, so those that maybe have an estranged relationship with their adult children, that group's actually taken off and become very popular. So based on the need that we discussed, they really took a deep look in 1999 for a confidential safe house. Thankfully, in 2002, we were given a wonderful home donation by the local Seroptimist of Carson Valley, and they're the ones who provided the funding to help kick off what we call Abby's Crossing, which is our confidential shelter. So right now, Abby's Crossing is located in Douglas County. It is a 13-bed shelter. It is a 3-bedroom home, and so we are able to kind of fit an array of different families. We've had to make some adjustments because of COVID, so for a while we were only having single families in each of the rooms. So unfortunately that did limit some of the services that we were able to provide, but lately we've opened that up a lot more. It is owned by the Family Support Council, of course. Women and children can stay up to 90 days in the program. And the whole goal is to gain self-sufficiency. And I think that's kind of the overall goal for most of the crisis shelters that we have in our area. The whole goal is to either receive support through resources and referrals to job retention, finding some sort of income. We can assist with transportation, either to doctor's appointments or to those jobs that they retain. We also assist with goal setting meetings. So if their goal is to get out of the area, to get to a safe location, maybe across the country, we can kind of work towards saving up money. We're doing some planning to get them headed in that direction. In 2004, we continued our crisis services and expanded it to specific advocacy. So right now we offer court advocacy. So we will go with our victims to court hearings, either for protection orders, extended protection orders, custody hearings, divorce hearings. We have no legal aid available, which we used to have. So our whole goal going there is just to advocate and provide emotional support for the victims that we are working with. We offer, of course, protection order application assistance. We can help with transportation in that sense as well. We can just do crisis intervention and support. We do assist with sexual assault calls. We work closely with our Special Victims Response Team, which is a collaborative team with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and District Attorney's Office to kind of work on the calls that they receive to provide direct and immediate intervention and support. Outside of that, we have school presentations. So we'll go into the 9th grade health classes and provide education on dating violence, sexual assault, and the effects of social media and how that all ties in, and the importance of realizing what a healthy relationship is as young as 14 or 15 years old. We, of course, provide other prevention and supportive services to include supervised visitation. We work with the courts to get those scheduled, and they are fee-based. We had at one time a grant that supported that we unfortunately lost. As I mentioned before, we have parenting classes. We try to kind of get in the mix to eradicate domestic violence as much as possible. So our last executive director in 2014 conducted a rather large study to kind of find some ideals on what could prevent family violence. And so results that he found from that study was there are, of course, multiple risk factors for domestic violence in the home. So as you can see on the screen, it kind of goes from the smaller risk factors all the way up to the largest risk factor. And so having a new child in the family, cause 1.2 times more of a likelihood to have violence in the home. And then looking at poverty levels, of course, if there's substance abuse. And what he actually found the most was that having someone with a permanent disability in the home created 6 times more of a likelihood to have some sort of violence or unhealthy living environment. And so with that, we graciously received funding, thanks to the Dean Seaman Foundation, so we could provide one-on-one support to adults with developmental disabilities. So with that, we created what we call our Jesse's Ranch program. The Jesse's Ranch program provides individual skills and meaningful connection for individuals with disabilities into the world. So part of our goals and the staff that work one-on-one with them is to help develop life skills, job placement and support, social skills and interactions, recreational involvement. We provide transportation services, and then other personal development services. So it could be assisting them with cleaning or money management, learning how to budget if they do have employment, kind of providing the assistance that they need so they can be independent in the world. And so as you can see, those are some of the things that I went through. Of course, other FSC services that we provide, as I already went through some of them, is group therapy, supervised visitation, and safe exchange services. We offer transportation services as well. We do try to limit transportation services to our county and then to those that we are only providing direct support and services to. We have a fleet of vehicles which we have generously received donations for, but it is limited, of course, to staffing. We do have emergency hotel nights. So if someone is coming to us, the wee hours of Saturday morning, and we know that they are probably going to transition to our shelter program, we're able to get them emergency hotel nights. We also work, as I said, with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and they have oftentimes funding to be able to provide support for a hotel night until we can, work with the individual and get them an appropriate intake process and making sure they get safely out to our Abby's Crossing shelter. We try to host outreach events as much as possible. Like I said, it's nice getting our name out there and the services that we provide. We kind of went through rather large transitions during the time that our last director was here, and then of course to now. A lot of people saw that we were providing our Jesse's Ranch services and thought, well, they don't do domestic violence anymore. And it is all tied together. So that's why we greatly appreciate getting our name out there and having these conversations with how it all ties in to, of course, the ultimate goal of eradicating family violence. And then, of course, this is our general presentation. I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but we always need people to, donate to our organization. So if you have anybody calling that wants to donate to a rural county, of course, that's always helpful to us. And the biggest thing that I can say is being an ambassador. We rely so heavily on the referrals from our sister organizations. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share Family Support Council with all of you, because if you have someone, oftentimes we work with individuals who maybe had a domestic in Reno. Their perpetrator found them at one of their locations there, and so they want to leave to go to a more rural location where the likelihood of them finding them is lessened. And so if you think of us, please make sure you give us a call. We of course have a standard intake process as well as everybody else, but we're trying, to meet the needs of our individuals as best as we can. We're always looking for board members and volunteers. All these volunteer positions kind of help run the organization, as I said, our crisis line, and then our board of directors. So just a little blurb, Family Support Council is changing the future of the community for the better. And I thank you all. As I mentioned in the beginning, my name is Veronica. I am the executive director. We are rebranding our website, so new exciting things will be coming soon. We're located at our Waterloo location for a really, really long time, over 20 years now. And we have just moved into new offices in the Haas Center, which is in the middle of town and more centralized. We're across the street from one of our major motels that graciously work with us in a lot of emergency situations. So we're really excited to kind of start this process of rebranding and have a new safe location to better serve our individuals. And that's it. on my end. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Hopefully I didn't ramble too fast.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica. No, I think you did really well. I didn't see any questions pop up in the chat box, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute or ask them in the chat. We'll stay on for another few minutes and answer any questions either to Jill or Veronica. And then I'm going to pop my email into the chat box. We have openings for people who want to present starting in October. So if you're interested, go ahead and email me. You have a comment, great information, Veronica.
Awesome.
All right, well, it looks like everybody's kind of winding down. I just want to thank both you, Veronica, and Jill for presenting today. And we'll go ahead and give you guys back another 10 minutes of your day. Thank you all for attending and participating. These presentations are for you, so anytime that you have questions or want to get connected with other providers, this is a great opportunity to do that. So thank you guys so much for taking advantage of this opportunity. And thank you to our presenters today.
Thank you so much, Jean, for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, you guys have a great day.